Welcome back to The Explainer. So glad you're here today, because we're going to dive into a really fascinating clash between two wildly different perspectives on American history and foreign policy. If you're the kind of person who loves peeling back the layers of big, complex narratives to see what makes them tick, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're looking at a viral argument that claims theology is literally the root of America's historical actions, and then we're going to pivot to a razor-sharp critique that says, hold on, that narrative is entirely missing the mark. Let's get right into it.
Here's the roadmap for today. We'll start with the Christian empire theory, then move on to weaponizing the faith, realpolitik in the Middle East, following the money, and finally, the ultimate distraction. We're going to journey from a viral, surface-level argument all the way down to the hidden mechanics of global finance.
Section 1. The Christian Empire Theory. Unpacking the viral narrative.
Our first source is a video by a creator known as Redacted History. They present a very specific thesis, which is best summarized by this exact quote. America is one of the most evil empires to ever exist, and a lot of that evil has been done in the name of Christianity. So this is the core argument we're analyzing first, the idea that religious motivation is the absolute primary driver behind American imperialism and some of its darkest historical chapters.
To back up that claim, the creator lays out a pretty distinct historical timeline. They point to the 1830s with the displacement of Native Americans, the 1860s and the enslavement of Africans, and then jump to the 2000s with the post-9/11 Middle East conflicts. According to the source, the taking of indigenous land, the horrors of slavery, and modern military actions in majority Muslim countries were all explicitly carried out, quote, in the name of Christianity. To justify this link, the creator points to the cultural and political evidence that's right in front of us every single day. Think about it. In God We Trust is stamped right on our currency. Kids recite One Nation Under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, and practically every American president has publicly identified as a Christian. The argument here is that because theology and politics are so deeply intertwined in the U.S., heavy criticism of the religion's role in global conflict is entirely warranted.
Section 2. Weaponizing the Faith. The realpolitik critique.
Now, our second source text offers a really sharp counter-argument. It directly contrasts two very different theories. On one side, you've got the video's religious motivation theory, the idea that theology drives policy. But on the other side, the second source presents the political greed theory. This critique argues that the viral video is deeply flawed because it dangerously confuses political greed with actual religious doctrine. Basically, the second text is saying that realpolitik, wealth, and power are what actually drive policy. Religion? Well, religion is merely used as a convenient tool. To really grasp this critique, we need to look at what they call the weaponization of faith. The second source argues that you simply can't blame Christianity for actions that completely violate its own core New Testament teachings. Things like peace, forgiveness, and loving your neighbor. Instead, the text asserts that historical figures and politicians weren't practicing genuine faith at all. They were weaponizing it. They basically used religious language to manipulate the public into supporting their imperial power grabs.
Section 3. Realpolitik in the Middle East. The missing context.
The perspective from our second source is that framing the last 25 years of conflict as simply a Christian nation attacking Muslims is dangerously incomplete. For decades, nations like Saudi Arabia and Qatar have leveraged absolutely massive oil and sovereign wealth, and the global impact of that, well, according to the text, they've actively funded and exported extreme radical fundamentalism, which inspires groups that attack Western nations. The critique argues that the original video acts like Western foreign policy is just unprovoked religious aggression, while completely ignoring this well-documented financial reality.
Section 4. Following the money. Global finance and influence.
So you might be wondering, if all this radical funding is actually happening, why do the mainstream media and politicians allegedly just ignore it? The answer, according to our second text, comes down to massive financial leverage. We're talking about literally trillions of dollars pouring into Western real estate, major corporations, professional sports teams, plus millions spent directly on Washington lobbying. The critique argues that these nations have bought their way into the system so thoroughly that Western leaders simply look the other way.
Which naturally leads us to ask, just how deep does this financial influence actually go? I want you to really think for a second about what it would take to sway the highest levels of global leadership.
Well, the source text gives us a truly jaw-dropping number as an anchor point: $400 million.
According to our source, that $400 million figure represents a luxury Boeing 747 jumbo jet.
a literal flying palace that was gifted to Donald Trump by the ruling family of Qatar. The text points out that the administration actually accepted this gift and even retrofitted it for temporary Air Force One use. The author's absolutely crucial point here is about the evasion of accountability. The text argues that if a foreign government can use legal loopholes to just hand a U.S. president an airplane of this magnitude without being instantly shut down over obvious bribery or national security concerns, well, that nation is certainly not going to be held accountable for funding radical movements.
Section 5. The ultimate distraction. Culture wars over capital.
The second text argues that because Western politicians are totally dependent on Gulf state capital and energy corridors, they just can't call out the real financial sources of radicalism. So what do instead? They divert attention. The text claims they point fingers at Israel or Iran, ensuring the general public stays entirely trapped in these basic left versus right media narratives.
And that brings us to the concluding thought from our critical source. They claim that political elites use these exact cultural and religious debates as a massive distraction so the public doesn't follow the money. You remember that viral anger over theology we saw in the first video? The critique argues that is exactly what the political establishment wants. It's like a smokescreen. It keeps the public completely blind to the real politic, the sovereign wealth, and the fact that foreign governments are quietly buying influence in the West.
So I want to leave you with this pretty provocative question to chew on. Are we all out here endlessly arguing over cultural theology, while foreign governments quietly buy our political reality? Understanding complex global issues really means looking past the surface-level narratives we're fed on our screens every single day. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep looking for the structure behind all the noise, and I will see you next time.